So thoughts on Zercher squats, deadlifts. Obviously, Zercher style movements have become incredibly popular. We don't use them and we don't like them for the people that we help with training. Now, I am fully happy for anyone who is doing their own training and they just think the Zercher deadlift or the Zercher squat is their favorite movement and they want to use that for the training they want to do in their life. Or if they're just obsessed with it for their sport, then you can go right ahead and do that. The reason we don't do that, we don't use it in our programs, is essentially it's inefficient and possibly to a certain degree has more risks in terms of its safety profile compared to the other movements you might do. So why is it inefficient and why do we think it's inefficient? So when it comes to Zercher squats, what are we trying to get? Are we trying to get an upper back movement or are we trying to get a leg movement? When we're trying to get a leg movement, having a back squat is going to allow, certainly in the cases of athletes, if that's what we're specifically talking about here, heavier weights for more volume with better quality squatting technique that keeps the load on the legs. Most often what happens with Zerchers is they turn into a hip hinge, and which is one of the reasons people find them very valuable for their back, is because the back takes a lot of that load. But if you're coming to us for squatting strength, you want better squatting mechanics. If you're coming to us for better performance and we're trying to load the legs, then we want to have the emphasis on the legs in the training so we can be more specific with the fatigue that's being incurred from the training from the legs. And we can say, okay, this is what the back squat is doing and this is what we know the other outcomes are. So when we get to Zercher squat, we're loading our legs to a degree, of course. We're heavily loading our back as well. But then we're left with this possibility of, okay, am I going to not do deadlifts later in the week? Am I going to do lighter deadlifts? Am I going to have to do lighter back squats? The way we would look at that is, okay, I can get a more efficient and streamlined loading process on the back squat. And then if I want to train our back for those athletes, a lot of times you'll see grapplers doing this. And we've had some very high level grapplers across different sports. So I think we have the wherewithal to be able to say confidently that in most cases you're better off isolating the back. So we can do stuff like back extensions, rows, weighted chin-ups, weighted pull-ups, 45-degree seal rolls. Any number of these things are available to us. And that way we can be a bit more sure on what's going on in training and we can load those more consistently. Lastly, the loading on this part can be quite uncomfortable for some people. The big risk is that some people have, I've seen it in one or two places, probably not a high occurrence, but tearing an extensor in your wrist is very hard to fix. It's one of the worst ones. A lot of times you need surgery to heal them up. They're very, very annoying, especially if in your sport like grappling, where this is really popular. Your extensors are actually probably under a huge amount of pressure if you're doing something like jiu-jitsu and a gi. If you're doing judo, your extensors, people injure them very regularly, or they're hugely inflamed in their flexors. And so loading this up, especially that bicep tendon, isn't really something that you want to be doing on top of that in training. Now, I know people say, oh, you just get used to it really fast or whatever, which is fine. But given that that's an issue or a potential issue, and then we have this case for efficiency, a more precise, heavier training, but with more efficient fatigue outcomes, to us, it doesn't really make sense to put all our baskets in Zercher. Now, I know a lot of people, especially in grappling sports, suddenly discovered the Zercher and were like, man, there's nothing like this for overall body tension, which is a thing you keep seeing, our functionality of training. But all strength is functional if you're moving a weight over a certain degree. And in those cases, it's certainly not more functional than anything else. A stronger back is a stronger back. And if there's better ways of organizing that in your training, then it's a better way of doing it. What I think happened here, especially with jiu-jitsu, is that 5 years ago, it's changed a lot in last years, but up to a couple of years ago, there were still people who were like, strength training for jiu-jitsu? No, that'll make me tired. When in reality, strength training for jiu-jitsu is incredibly important. That's why steroids are so popular in jiu-jitsu, is because it negates the need to do a lot of strength training because you just get up to that baseline of strength and muscle mass much easier if you just take a load of PEDs and do your jiu-jitsu. And then what you got was people who weren't really into strength training before started doing the Zercher squat because they didn't really do much else training. Suddenly the Zercher squat, because it's a loaded weight and they're moving their legs and their back through range of motion with a weight. And suddenly their back got stronger. And then instead of going, oh, was there other ways I could do the training? They were like, man, Zercher squats are it. It's what you definitely see in some cases. So again, if it's working for someone or that's what you really want to train, we're totally fine with it. We're definitely not going to make any kind of sweeping declaration that Zerchers are terrible for you and you shouldn't do them and no one will get any benefits. We just don't think they're the most efficient way of going about training for the people who, A, come to us for athletic development, for sport, or, a lot of you watching this because you like back squats, you want bigger back squats, and we're here to facilitate massive back squats.